what is a speaker? Like, how does one end up getting to just yap as a job?
Deliberately being yourself is what makes you stand out. And I'd say that's what differentiates speakers to individuals. I think everyone has a story to tell. I remember when I was the quietest in my life, it served a purpose. It made me a great listener. I wouldn't be a speaker if I wasn't a listener first. Do you know what I mean? I swear by this one thing that I've done for the longest time, and it's going to be cringe.
That's beautiful, and I don't think it's cringe. How are you redefining safety to coexist with challenge?
I love this question.
You need to slow down to change direction. And if you're going 100 miles an hour, you won't even realize that you're going the wrong way. Like, what advice do you have for someone who's like, I have so many ideas, I want to share them. I want you to give the audience homework.
Oh, I feel like being mean.
Hi everyone, I'm so excited for you guys to listen to this conversation, but there are a few things that might be a little bit triggering around eating disorders and mental health and that kind of thing. So if that's something that is troubling to you, maybe go check out another episode. I'm going to link some in the bio. But if you can listen to themes around food and mental health, then I really, really, really recommend that you listen to this conversation because it's extremely powerful. Thank you. I hope you enjoy. Let me know in the comments. Amazing. I'm so excited to have this chat with you today. Welcome to the Empower Sounds podcast. Can you please start by introducing yourself?
Of course. Well, thank you so much for having me here. It's been amazing being here with you. Well, my name's Bhavika. I'm a marketer by profession, but I recently started my own business delivering talks and workshops. I would say I'm a creative and a community builder by heart, and an executioner by actions, I would say. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey, I would say, growing up as an immigrant, coming into London and merging two different cultures. So yeah, it's been really fun.
That's awesome. Let's start at the start of your journey. What inspired you to become a speaker? And we were talking off camera just now about how we both love talking. But what were you like growing up, and what was it like? Just what is your foundation for speaking? Where did it come from?
Do you know what? It's so funny you mentioned that, because I was going through my albums yesterday after so many years, and I literally asked my mum, what was I like, mum, before 5 years old? And I saw so many pictures of me on the stage and stuff like that. And of course, before 5 years old, you don't remember much. And the way she described me was that you were quiet, but you were bold. And I think that encapsulates me so well, because I'm not maybe the loudest in the room, but I know when to show up and, make an impact, or try my best to make an impact at least. And I suppose that kind of led me into speaking, because I would say growing up, I was always quiet, but I was always inquisitive. I would always ask questions, and I'd put my hand up first if I want to try something new, from, I don't know, dancing to art to everything really. And little did I know it would carry on into my adulthood, and here I am now. After 6 years in marketing, I never imagined that I'd be a speaker delivering talks and workshops for amazing communities and people like those who follow Empower Studios, of course. And yeah, just using what I do best to the best of my ability, I suppose.
For anyone who doesn't know, and I think, again, it's just one thing that is a bit like vague, what is a speaker? Like, how does one end up getting to just yap as a job?
Do you know what, my friend and my coach, I said the same thing to her about 2-3 years ago, and I was like, I didn't know you could get paid to speak. I can be a professional yapper, honestly, and we laughed. And do you know what, it's been quite a long journey, and I suppose speaker is not just about, like, I genuinely believe that being yourself can sometimes be a passive thing to say, but deliberately being yourself is what makes you stand out. And I'd say that's what differentiates speakers to individuals. I think everyone has a story to tell. Everyone is a storyteller, but how you do it, when you do it, in front of who, and what bits of you do you share, I think that's what kind of sets the tone. And if you look at so many celebrities, there's so many different kinds of speakers, from people on podcasts like us to people on stages to YouTubers even. They're also speakers, even if it's virtual. So I'd say deliberately being yourself.
That's amazing. And I love that idea of deliberately being yourself. I think it's really hard to do. So I want to talk a little bit more about like what does that mean, and like how can you start doing that? How can you first of all do the self-reflection to be like, what even am I? Who am I? And then how can you like implement that and cut out all the noise?
Of course. That's a really great question, and I'm just going back to my own journey where I know growing up, when I first came from India to the UK, my personality had dimmed down quite a bit. I was the shyest person in the room. I suddenly wasn't the boldest that I used to think I was. And over the course of years, from going into primary school to high school, I was like, do you know what? Maybe this is just me and I should just be who I am. But something in me felt really, really off. I was like, I could be doing more, but I feel this invisible block almost. And I was myself, you know, as people say, just be yourself. I was myself, and it wasn't enough, I would say. And this is not to say that you shouldn't accept parts of you. Of course, there's a space for that. But deliberately being yourself is asking yourself, what bits of myself do I enjoy? What bits of myself do I actually like? What bits of myself do I don't like? And instead of trying to fix that or change that, coming to truth, like what purpose does it actually serve? Because I remember when I was the quietest in my life, it served a purpose. It made me a great listener. I wouldn't be a speaker if I wasn't a listener first. Do you know what I mean? And each aspect of you that evolves with every season serves a purpose. So coming into acceptance with that first, and then going into the work of, okay, what is my ideal self look like? And doing all the crazy stuff that you see on the internet, like manifesting 101, vision boards and this and that. I think there's a fine balance to have between accepting yourself and pursuing to be a version of you that you're happy with, because I'd say when you really accept yourself, whatever phase of you comes at any point will not phase you at all. You'll be content with it, and instead of trying to rush to fix yourself, you will look at yourself and be like, okay, do you know what? This is a phase. It serves a purpose, and I'm going to let her enjoy this phase, and there will be a time when my best version, as I like to put it, will come forward.
That's so beautiful, and I love this idea of self-acceptance, and we're going to touch on it in a second. But before we do, I love what you said of, I can't be a speaker without being a listener. And I think that often we're in a society where we're taught to listen to respond rather than listen to like communicate, connect and engage. So do you have any advice on how to become a good listener?
Yeah, of course. I'd say taking your time. I would say before you respond to someone, take 3 seconds in your head, take a little break, or intently look at someone, making eye contact like we are now. And the best conversations I've had people just randomly, be it friends or whoever, say to me that, Bhavika, you listen to me intently. And of course, me being a bit oblivious to it, I asked them, I was like, what do you mean? Explain it to me. And they're just like, you don't rush to respond or be relatable. You literally just listen to me and look at me and make me feel seen. And I think that's the biggest thing you can give someone, is make them feel seen. And it doesn't always have to be through words. It can be through your presence. It can be through eye contact, body language. And if we're touching more on words, I'd say you know someone's listening to you when you mirror something back to them. It could be repeating the last word they said. Like, say you liked, I don't know, Prague or something. You can be like, oh my gosh, yes, Prague is beautiful. Like, you acknowledge what they've said, and then you continue the dialogue. And I suppose at the foundation of it really is being able to read the room. I think that's a big one that people often miss.
100%. And what about learning to listen to yourself? Because being a good listener is not just a skill that benefits your ability to connect with other people, but in my experience, it helps you connect with yourself on a deeper level. So how have you cultivated that ability to listen to yourself as well?
I swear by this one thing that I've done for the longest time, and it's going to be cringe to anyone listening to this right now. It's going to be cringe, and I'm giving you a disclaimer. Sitting in front of the mirror when you know you're not going to be disturbed for at least half an hour to an hour, start by making eye contact with yourself. Do you feel intimidated? How does that make you feel? Do you feel like crying? Do you feel rage? When you lock your eyes with yourself, it's very intimidating. And I still remember the first time I did it, I felt like that wasn't me. And I asked myself, holy crap, it doesn't feel like me. I'm looking at my reflection and it does not feel like me. Why is that? And then all the thoughts and questions and everything started to come out. And you're going to get the hang of it eventually, but start by making eye contact, then start asking questions. How are you really today? Because, you know, today, in today's day and era, we're surrounded by technology, so many people, and it's great. It's great having a community, but sometimes people feel lonely even when they are with people. And oftentimes it's because you're not for yourself, like you're not supporting yourself, you're seeking it externally. So I'd say that's the best way to start internally, like listening to yourself and making yourself feel seen.
That's beautiful. And I don't think it's cringe. I've done it before as well, not for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. That's a lot for me. But like 2 minutes. How do you sit with yourself for that like prolonged period of a time? That's like, again, I think sometimes we don't listen to ourselves or our feelings because there's a lot of discomfort around that. And so it's so much easier to like focus on the external world and the external connections and stuff. So yeah, how have you been able to develop that level of not even self-love, but self-acceptance that you can actually just sit and stare at yourself and talk to yourself for an hour?
I'd say for me, this is probably like a bit extreme. Everyone goes through different kinds of seasons and whatnot, but growing up, I would say I've grown up too quickly, and from learning how to cook at 7 to, you know, being a guardian for a younger brother from such a young age, because both of my parents were not there. So the only person I really could rely on myself was myself. And it also meant I had to be there for others, like my brother when he was younger, for example. And growing up, it was a lot of pressure for me personally. And for a very brief time, I was even suicidal. So I grew up with so much hate for myself that I just wanted to change things in me. And there came a point where I was like, do you know what? I don't like this feeling. I genuinely don't like this. And you know, when you get tired of your own shit, that's when the pivot point comes. I think that was it for me. And of course, it was very uncomfortable at the beginning. Of course, I didn't sit in front of that mirror for 20 minutes the first time. I remember I looked at it for maybe like 30 seconds and I got creeped out because I was like, who the hell is she? Like, that's a different person in there. Take her away. Like, who is she? And it really creeped me out, but it gave me a signal. I think our emotions, our thoughts, our patterns, they're a signal to ourselves, and we need to be able to pick those up. And from then onwards, I was like on a bit of a mission. I was like, do you know what? I'm not going to wait for anyone. I'm just going to make myself happy, whatever the hell that means. Doing art at 12 a.m., going to a cafe by myself for the first time, going to the movies by myself. And of course, it built up over the years gradually. And we were just talking about solo tripping. And taking that solo trip earlier this year was a really big step for me, you know, but you had to take the baby steps leading up to that. And maybe down the line, I don't know, maybe I would want to live alone for a year or something like that. You know, self-growth, self-acceptance is ever growing, I would say. Like the bits of me that I may have accepted 10 years ago, of course, there's a new bit of me that's going to come out in my personality growing up with my experiences, and I'll have to learn how to accept that as well. So yeah, I suppose it's a bit of a journey.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, the way that you articulate it, it sounds like you've really considered it, and like you help people with this kind of journey on for themselves. So tell us a little bit more about your talks and like what do you speak about? What do you help people with?
I would say the biggest theme for myself growing up that I didn't feel was safety, I would suppose. Safety to be myself with myself. As I mentioned, I was suicidal for a little bit of my childhood. I struggled a lot with binge eating and mental health issues and that sort of stuff. And it was because I didn't feel safe, and I was looking for safety in other things and other mediums, channels, people even. And that's what my work really focuses on. It's to give people the safety to return back to themselves, not to be the best version of themselves they can ever imagine, who, I don't know, earns £1 million, who's the richest person in the room. Not like that. Someone who you're proud to be. Someone you feel like, yes, that's actually who I am. And I struggled to be that for whatever reason. And now I feel safe to be that. And that's what my talks cover as well. It's, first of all, learning how to decondition and acknowledge the patterns that you kind of grew up with. It could be childhood like me, it can be borrowed. We're surrounded by so much information, so oftentimes it's not our thoughts that we think, it's borrowed thoughts.
Yeah.
So really delving into that on kind of a sociological level and also kind of psychological level. And I've got like frameworks and stuff like that I've used based on my own experiences, and I use that to kind of guide people through that journey with themselves. And that's what I do basically now.
Safety is something that is really important, but a lot of people don't really understand what it means because it's not a very sexy word. And so for anyone who's listening to this and they're like, what the hell does that mean? Like, what do you mean safety, feeling safe being yourself? How would you define it to them?
I would literally, I actually did a poll very recently and I asked the crowd, what does safety mean to them? And I didn't give people any clue as to what context I was speaking at. And there were so many responses around home. And if you imagine home as a building, like made of bricks, if you visualize that, how do you feel? I would like them to imagine that, but within themselves. Instead of walls, it's your own body cells. Instead of rooms, it's your own mind and all the compartments within your mind. Instead of certain lighting in the kitchen versus living room, it's the kind of emotions that you switch on and off. How do you feel passing through your own mind? I would start from there. I would say, how do you feel being in your own self, your own thoughts, your own body, your own skin? And safety is so broad, and like I mentioned, I struggled with binge eating for the longest time, and I still do from time to time, and I think it's quite common in women, like we stress eat quite a bit, and like for that's physical safety, we don't feel safe to express ourselves, that's why we turn to different channels. In other times it's environmental safety, maybe in a workspace culture where you don't feel safe to lead, to be the best version of yourself and show that version of yourself at work for X, Y, and Z reason. And it comes in so many different clothes. So I'd say safety is when you feel home with yourself.
That's so... I love that description. But when you said home, it made me think a little bit about what you were saying about being a migrant and how not everyone has a clear-cut relationship with home, and how home in itself can feel unsafe or undefined or confusing because you're like, I don't really feel like I belong to a place, or I don't feel like I have that root anchor or safety. And so what advice do you have around like navigating that?
Do you make such an interesting point, because I've moved about 11 houses myself, and where I come from, I don't feel home there. I feel it's my lineage, sure, like I can tell where I'm from India and XYZ, but I don't feel like I belong from there. And I would say, if you don't have anything, try to visualize if you did have something, what would it be? And recreate that within yourself. And I'd say that's something I did, because like I said, I've moved about 11 houses in the last 15 years, and something I've always struggled in my own personal life is I've moved so many schools. I've never had people that are constant in my life. And every time I would, when I was younger, I would see friends from kindergarten or something, I just feel that gap in me, and like I don't have a friend that I belong to. I don't have a home that I belong to. And I always felt that gap in me, and I don't feel it so much now, because you're able to anchor yourself within yourself. And this is a personal opinion, of course, and everyone's entitled to their own opinions, but I would say you're the only person you're going to carry with for the rest of your life, really. So why don't you make that home within yourself instead of a place, instead of home being like, you know, a village, a town, a city? Why can it not be a person, and that person being yourself?
That's beautiful. And I think with home, like, there is a level of like love and respect. Like, you take care of your home. And I think, again, like, sometimes the way that we're told to take care of ourselves and the way that actually feels good is very different. And you've mentioned your relationship with like eating, and that can be something that's really difficult to navigate, because like what women should do with their health and bodies is like a whole
Different topic.
it's a whole minefield. But like, how does one take care of themselves? There's this like understanding of home.
Do you know, a couple of years ago, I was nearly like severely obese, and I was in my early 20s, and I hit a wall with myself where I was like, do you know what? I actually don't feel good. I don't feel good dieting. I don't feel good doing this, and I don't feel good in my body. And I joined PT. I was paranoid of the gym, and I also started therapy, and it was like a whole 360 for me. And if there's something I could pass on to people in terms of how do you take care of yourself like home, is really sitting and asking with yourself, if no one had any say in what you do, what would you do? Sometimes maybe you want to eat something, sure, but other times ask yourself, am I eating this to distract myself, or do I actually need to replace it with something else? Because emotion, like, it stores in our body. Emotion gets stored in your body, and if you don't have a channel for it, it will keep spiraling in it. So you need to learn to like transmute it almost, and find ways and build systems around that. And personally for me, I have a variety of systems that I turn to every now and then. From now, I do go to the gym, but gym being one of them, doing art, listening to music. Sometimes you need to talk to a friend. Sometimes you need to go take a walk, read a book, you know, and it's finding those systems, and those won't come naturally by default. You need to be willing to be uncomfortable for a little bit. And we're stubborn inside, if I'm being really honest. We're very stubborn. Like, just because I've always been like this, that's all I ever know. But it's having that feel of challenging yourself. Be like, do you know what? I'm going to challenge myself to do something different for 5 minutes and see how that feels. If it doesn't feel good, you can change it. That's completely fine. But really asking yourself, what would I do if no one had a say in what would I do?
Yeah. What would you do if no one had a say in what you did?
Yeah, literally. It's crazy when the kind of thoughts you come up with when you forget what others would say, when you forget a schedule or a routine. Of course, being mindful, you know, like, say you had an evening free, instead of going to the pub or something, ask yourself, what would I rather do? Do you want to go for a movie? Sure, go watch a movie. You know, sometimes the answer is not what we think it is, and it's always like hidden under all these layers of ourselves, and we really need to keep asking why, until we get to that answer.
Yeah, a question I ask is similar to that, but I feel like this question really grounds me, of like, what would I do if I had no fear? And so there's something I like to ask a lot of people as well. And I feel like it's similar to your question. And I know you've shared that you like to push yourself out of your comfort zone, and you do that a lot. But if you had no fear, what would you do?
I'd probably start, like, do you know what this thing has, we were talking very like briefly about this. I was paranoid of speaking on stages, and now I'm a speaker. Like, that was one of the biggest things I did this year, was redefine the meaning of my, like, what my passion was, and pursuing it. And do you know what? It shows up in the little things, like being on a podcast, for example. I told her I've been putting this off for like 3 years, and now I'm finally here, you know? So it's those little micro acts of permission that you almost need to give yourself.
Yeah. What I think is really interesting is you talk about safety and talking about challenging yourself. And usually the way that they're portrayed is very contradictory.
Yes.
That you stay safe. And a lot of people, then they think of safety, they think of like staying in their comfort zone, sticking to a routine, doing the same things, hanging out with the same people, having the same thoughts every day. And so, how are you redefining safety to coexist with challenge?
I would almost like to think it as, oftentimes when we ask ourselves, like, what would I do if I had no fear? Sometimes, like those intrusive thoughts that you get, like, I don't know, I would just want to backpack for 10 years or something, or stuff like that. There's a difference between being reckless, and there's a difference between allowing yourself to come out of your comfort zone. And how I like to think of safety in this context is giving yourself the permission to come out of your comfort zone with systems in place to lean back to when you don't feel quote unquote safe. And that's how I would look at safety almost, is like, I'll give you my own example. Being a speaker was not on my list for the longest time, and I've always been a planner, plan A to Z my whole life. And I was literally saying, for once, I have zero plans. But how do I allow myself to still pursue my passion of what I'm doing currently, with almost like a little, not a comfort zone, but almost like a cushion to lean back to when I don't feel the most fearless, And on a day-to-day, sometimes that looks like my parents, I lean back on my parents. I lean back to my friends. I brainstorm ideas with them. I have those little micro systems built into day-to-day to allow me to lean back when I feel quote unquote safe and comfortable, while still allowing myself to, in the bigger picture, still be out of my comfort zone, if that makes sense. I hope I explained that right.
No. There's no right or wrong way, and I think that's a really, really interesting way of putting it. And we've talked about safety. I want to talk about power, because that's another thing that you talk about. So what is power to you?
I like to challenge the people listening to this. Power, often people, when they think of the word power, they see this explosiveness and this bright, bold, extroverted thing. But I actually see it as this quiet inner voice that's constantly present, like white noise almost. It's always there in the background, and you don't hear it until you actually pay attention to it. I'd say that's power to me, because power doesn't always have to be loud. It can be quiet, but it can be constant. And I think that's power. It's not the extremity of it. It's not always the explosiveness of it that's powerful. It's it being constant in your day-to-day life. And I would say when I think of power, I think of acceptance so much, because I wouldn't constantly show up for myself if I didn't accept myself. And that is how I link to power, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's really, really important. And I think that links to this whole idea, what you said about self-acceptance. What is the difference between self-love and self-acceptance? Because there's so much like discourse on the internet around self-love and love yourself and like yourself every day. I don't like myself every day, but I feel like self-acceptance is still there, because you just understand that like it's fine. And so how have you cultivated like a self-acceptance that's more neutral?
We treat this concept of self-love as this, like a thing like that's odd one out, that's this amazing new like we put it on a pedestal, and that's wrong. Because self-love shouldn't be on a pedestal, it should be the norm, in my opinion. And oftentimes people also mix it with being ignorant, non-empathetic, and in this whole kind of trend of being out there and bold. All great, of course, but we forget the basic things, the foundations, like having empathy for yourself and for others, being mindful of yourself and of others. And sometimes self-love is not doing all those bougie things. Not everyone is born with millions of pounds, like it's not always going on fancy spa dates or doing fancy stuff. Sometimes self-love can look like having a quiet evening in and listening to your favorite music. Maybe that's self-love for you. And I feel like people put self-love on such a pedestal that we almost make this like an extraordinary thing, but it's not an extraordinary thing. It should be a default thing actually within yourself. And you asked about the difference between self-love and self-acceptance. Self-acceptance, I feel, is, like you said, it's a lot more neutral in that it doesn't put concealer over the blemishes on yourself. It lets you accentuate your natural self, even on the days when you're not the happiest.
Mm-hmm.
You can still learn to love yourself despite those, with those, not even despite, I'll correct myself, with those flaws, you know, not despite those flaws, with those flaws.
Yeah, 100%. And it sounds like you're very passionate about these themes. So how did you find these like passions and then kind of condense them into talks that you deliver to audiences? How, if anyone is like looking to become a speaker, how can they decide what they want to like be a thought leader in, or what they want to talk about, and what is the process of like actually becoming a speaker?
I'm a very visual person, and when you asked me this question, I could almost feel like I was following a red string all along without knowing where it led me to. And it feels a bit like that. I suppose personally, I'm a master of all, jack of all trades, master of none. And that's always confused me because I never knew what bit I would sort of specialize in, and I still don't feel like I specialize in something. I loved enjoying every bit of, you know, what's human in us. And in terms of how you find what you're passionate about, I did this anonymous survey with 20 of my close people and even non-close people, just to have a bit of a mix. And I did this anonymous survey, and I'll actually share it with you after this if you want.
Yeah.
And I genuinely asked questions like, if you could come to me for anything, what would it be for? Some people said, you've got great ideas, but others came for things like, you give me a holistic perspective on something. And, you know, we don't give ourselves the enough credit, and our lens of ourselves is very one-dimensional, I would say. So it's really good to ask all the people that you surround yourself with what they think of you.
Yeah.
And not in terms of like validation, but as research, as I like to say. And when I still look back at the responses from the survey, they were completely anonymous, so I have no idea who said what. And I think because of that, led me to here, and I invested in, you know, learning from other speakers and having mentors and stuff like that, and they were the ones who kind of guided me into this. And that's when I first found out you could actually get paid to do this kind of stuff, and I was like, what? I'm a professional yapper.
That's awesome. And how would someone go about getting a mentor if they want to be a speaker or they want to share their ideas? Where do they find them?
LinkedIn. I would say if you look at someone, I think we almost always choose mentors like, I want to be like that person, but I would disagree with that. Don't go for someone where you think, I want to be like them. That's also a good trait to have, but go with someone who's already been there, done that, and you can see yourself kind of going side by side with them, and they can actually tag you along on that journey with yourself, where you could, I don't know, shadow them, where you could participate in the rooms that they're part of, for example. And I would say look for people that have similar traits to you but are almost like one step ahead, you know. And it can be quite intimidating sometimes and humbling, I would say, as well. But that's the whole joy of it, right? Like being open-minded, learning, and it's never-ending journey, really. Like even now, I'm part of such amazing communities, and I'm still like, wow, I didn't know this, and I still get to learn so much from each other, you know.
That's so awesome. And you said LinkedIn. So if someone knows who they want to reach out to, but they don't know how to do it because they're a bit shy and awkward and they don't know this person, do you have any tips for like cold LinkedIn or warm LinkedIn outreach, or just like reaching out to people and asking for help and guidance?
I would say the most underutilized thing is commenting on posts, because it is in a public forum. It's not as intimidating as one-on-one. So maybe start from there, and it doesn't have to be directly like, this is what I want from you. It can be a bit more human than that. And I think we're so serious sometimes in work context, and it doesn't have to be that serious. You can have fun while doing it. So say you saw this person at an event or something, and you can just comment like, this looks great, or add your 2 cents about whatever the post was about, for example. And I would say my marketing head is kind of coming in here, but that's about bringing that awareness up about yourself into that person's field almost. And then eventually, you could build up and maybe message them, be like, hey, I hope your day is going really well. And you don't have to always directly ask what you want. You can build up that rapport. And I'll give you an example. Two weeks ago or something, I connected with someone on Instagram, and we just started talking about dogs. And we had so much in similarity work-wise that she actually ended up helping me in a professional context. Now, that's so random, right? But it just goes to show that common things can be better at connecting people than being like salesy ever would.
I do want to ask you though is, you pitched yourself to me for this, and I thought that was really brave, and I thought it was really cool. And so without being salesy, how do you do the other approach where you don't like reach out to someone to ask for something, but you reach out to someone to like offer something, or to be like, hey, this is me. This is why I think I would be like the good person for this opportunity or this mentorship or this platform. Like, how can people go about doing that?
I would suggest putting yourself in the other person's world. I'd give our example, for example. I've been following your work for a good few months, and I actually found you through a common acquaintance. I put myself in your world by listening to your podcast, and we engaged on your podcast first. And then we started engaging, like from our stories and stuff like that. We had quite a few things in similar, and that's how we built that human connection. And it almost removes that, fear around like, oh my gosh, I'm pitching myself. I don't know, will they accept me? And no. It removes that fear. It makes the other person more human as well, just like you are. And then it becomes so much easier to talk about what you do. And then it becomes a bit more natural as well. And instead of kind of talking about this is what I do, maybe think from a perspective of how would my work benefit them? What would their audience get from me, And having that helping approach almost, rather than putting the spotlight on you, put the spotlight on what they want and positioning yourself like that.
Yeah, no, I found it a really, really kind, but also like clever and intentional message. And I thought like, wow, like that's such a nice way of doing it. And again, like I'm a founder, and I think that I see this a lot in the founder space, because like a lot of good businesses are built through connection and network and asking for help, and there's a correct way of asking for help, and I feel like that's something that you really nailed on the head. But aside from the actual delivery of asking for a certain opportunity or just pitching yourself or whatever, there's that thing around like confidence of like, do I actually have value to offer this person? And I think that's something that stops a lot of people before they get started. Like, it's definitely stopped me from saying stuff in the past, and now I try and be braver about it. But how do you feel confident enough to even put yourself in a place to create an opportunity?
I relate to this so much because I am in that season as we speak, and I've had a business before, I've been a founder before, completely unrelated to this. So for me, it's not a matter of am I brave enough to do this? It's about what do I actually say? What value do I actually bring? That was the biggest obstacle for me personally. And I would say when stuff like this does come up, but like based on what I said just a little while ago, your emotions are a signal, listen to it. Take the step back. You don't have to always rush. You're not going to lose something that's meant for you. Sometimes something better will come along, and say we didn't come on this podcast, say I didn't get the opportunity to be your guest today, maybe there would have been something in the next season. Maybe there would have been a different collaboration. Like having that abundant mindset first and allowing yourself to take that step back is, I think, a very important step. And then you can kind of do the inner work as to, what do I actually say? What value do I actually bring? That was the biggest obstacle for me personally. And I would say when stuff like this does come up, but like based on what I said just a little while ago, your emotions are a signal, listen to it. Take the step back. You don't have to always rush. You're not going to lose something that's meant for you. Sometimes something better will come along, and okay, why am I confused about the value that, pick the vein where it hurts the most, Maybe it's your pricing, maybe it's your this, maybe it's your that. Do the logical work that you need to do, research, etc. And when you feel like, okay, I actually am passionate and I know what I have to say is not, it connects to me internally, and let me give it a shot. Let me pitch this now. So really allowing yourself to take that step back, because I've been in the marketing world for more than 6 years. I've been surrounded by salespeople, and they're always in this like go 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 mentality. You're gonna miss this. You need to do this now. There's a space and time for that, of course. Space and time to act when you have the momentum. But when you don't have the momentum, when you're trying to create the momentum, allowing yourself to take that step back when needed. Sometimes you're just giving yourself excuses. Sure, you need to be able to call yourself out on that too. Yeah. But this is more in terms of not knowing your value and doing the work to find your value before you actually go and pitch that value.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. And I think that's so true, because sometimes you need to slow down to change direction. And if you're going 100 miles an hour, you won't even realize that you're going the wrong way. Yeah. And so I totally get that. And I think that, again, it's a very brave thing to do. And when I saw you do it, it gave me the permission to do it to other people as well. So I think that's so important. And I want to chat more about like the business of like setting up a speaking thing, and how you do workshops and how you like find opportunities. So you've talked about like creating opportunities through a network and getting mentors. But what is actually like, how does a speaking business work? Like, how do you make money?
I would say I'm still very much at the beginning steps, so I can only share the knowledge that I have so far. Speaking, I think you need to really broaden your mindset around it. Like, I had a very limited mindset as to what speaking was when I first started, and I would always think these big ass conferences and workshops and all these really big spaces that you can visualize. But speaking it can be small. It can be in a room with 2 people, for example, like now. It can be by yourself in your room. That's also speaking. It can be on an Instagram reel. That's also speaking. And there's so many people that monetize on that make an opportunity out of it. And of course, whichever path you choose to take is going to take a different kind of timeline almost. But defining what speaking actually is for you and where you feel you could add value and thrive, I think identifying that is the first step. And personally for me, so I did a lot of speaking alongside my corporate job last year first, only because I was trying this thing out. And as you know, I'm a planner. So I wanted to give this a real go, and I did all the work around what's my signature talk, what am I going to talk about, and doing all the inner work that I needed to do. And I did a lot of free stuff, really. And it put me in rooms that I couldn't even imagine being in. Sometimes it was on a panel, other times it was for International Women's Day, like earlier this year actually. And I was like, wow, couldn't have ever thought. And then comes the monetizing bit. Once you've got the hang of it, then you can be like, okay, let me put up my packages, what I'm actually offering, how am I positioning, what am I pricing, and all that kind of jazz.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And so how does someone get their first speaking gig? Like, what advice do you have for someone who's like, I have so many ideas, I want to share them, I want to talk, I want to shine. What is like ways that people can do that?
I would suggest first look around you and identify what rooms you're already in. My first speaking was at the company I worked for. And of course, I'm not going to make money for that, but I was already an employee there. And the worst they could say was no, or maybe later, Yeah. And I would say first look around the rooms that you're already part of and put yourself out there first. And I remember we had like a colour in tech event a few days like after that. And I wasn't speaking at that, but I just went there to network. And I would say that was my kind of second step, which is find other rooms that you could be a part of. And like I said, put yourself in the other person's world and talk to them and find out what value are they actually looking for, and building that network up. And that's how I would say it's like a domino effect almost, where one thing kind of leads to another. And it's crazy because I still am connected to all those people. And sometimes if they don't have an opportunity for me, they know someone else who might have an opportunity for me, you know, and that's also valuable.
There's a significant part of the population that would rather die than public speak. I can't remember the stats, I don't want to butcher it, but I think it's like in the 90s. And so I'll put it in the description if I find it. But like, I know for a fact that there is a significant population that would rather die than public speak. And so how have you cultivated the skill of doing that in terms of body language, in terms of like alter ego, power poses, like all these kind of things? Like, how do you like captivate a room and feel confident to do so?
I would say, so my first ever public speaking was during the COVID time when I was very introverted, and I'm literally like, I was so introverted, I would choke literally in meetings. Like, no, I'm seriously kidding. Like, if I could bring one of my ex-managers here, they would probably like, they will witness to it. I would rather choke than, you know, public speak, and I have on stage before. And this was during COVID time where I did Instagram lives where it wasn't so intimidating, and I couldn't see like all the people down there. I could just see my own face. And it was really scary. I did so many takes on my own phone first before going live. And I was like, this is a really bad idea. Take me out of here immediately. And we did a whole season of that show. And I met so many wonderful people. And it was just something on a whim that I did. And I didn't imagine it would be such a thing that I'd get known for the next foreseeable, you know, few years, until I stopped doing the show, of course. But that was my first public speaking, and I would say understanding where you're not where you're not having that fight or flight state, but where you're just a little bit uncomfortable, but you're still somewhat comfortable, where you're like 50% uncomfortable, I would say. Finding that spot, I think that's a good starting point. And I would say from then onwards, of course, I had a lot of help from my mentors and stuff like that. And I still look up to so many other speakers who are great at what they do. And from there, I got the right kind of coaching as well as to, you know, how to accentuate my existing characteristics, for example.
Yeah.
The bit that I mentioned on listening, you know, you need to know what kind of audience you're speaking to. If you're in a virtual room, for example, you're not going to do a whole thing on like, I'm going to ask you a question, guys, come on. You're not going to do that virtually. You're probably going to do a poll on Zoom or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's understanding that difference and being able to pivot accordingly. And I'd say the last thing is just practice. Like, I still get so nervous sometimes. And do whatever you got to do to get those nerves out. I do a little dance before.
That's so nice.
I do a little dance session. I sing. I prep up my voice. Do whatever it takes to, you know, get those jitters out of you to be in that room, and just keep practicing. My signature talk, I practiced for a year before I started pitching it as a business. Wow. So everyone's on a different timeline, you know, and you just got to give yourself the time that you need.
And you mentioned pitching around a business. So how do you value your talks? Because it's yourself, and that's so scary, and there's like levels of like confidence and security, and it's also a very hush thing. Like creative industry, like talent is something that's so like gate kept. You don't know like what to charge, you don't know how much you should charge, all that kind of stuff. So how did you like navigate that, and like do you have any advice for anyone who's starting out with that as well?
Yeah, of course. And I'm one of those people where I do my bit of research however long it takes. I know people who charge 15 grand for 45 minutes. Now, I'm starting off, so I could see a big gap between me and them, and that's not like a self-comparison thing, but it really made me uncomfortable as to what was possible for me, and I had to sit a lot with that. And it still makes me uncomfortable, don't get me wrong, but now I don't feel like it's a far away thing. It's about knowing how to put yourself on that trajectory.
Yeah.
And that can look so different for each one of you, you know. So it's doing that bit of research, and I spoke to so many people, from someone charging 15 grand for 45 minutes to someone I know who charges, I don't know, 2 grand, 3 grand. And does that feel more digestible to you? I would say money and value, it's a very nervous system based thing. And we think it's a fear thing, it's a confidence thing, but I wouldn't say so. It's a nervous system thing. If I would ask you this, Mahika, like if you had 10K in your bank within like 5 seconds from now, how would you feel?
I've actually been thinking about this a lot recently because I feel like my anxiety doesn't come from how to make money. It's what to do with it when it's there and how to manage it and how to hold it. And I realize that comes from like a lot of things, conditioning, programming, all this stuff, and like confidence around being bad at maths and like all this stuff. And so it would stress me out because I'd be like, I don't know what to do with it. I don't know what taxes I'm meant to pay. I don't know how to budget this, how to invest this. But recognizing that, now I'm taking steps to learn more about it, to make myself feel safer, what you said earlier, around safety, and how sometimes we don't let ourselves receive the opportunities that we are more than, like, what's the word? Not requirements, like...
More than capable.
More than capable of having, because we don't know how to, like, hold it. Yeah. And so, I think that's such a interesting conversation. How do you navigate that relationship? How do you find safety in your relationship with money?
It's been a journey, if I'm being really honest, because growing up, I have spent about 20 years of my life sleeping on the floor or sharing a room. And I remember the house that I'm in right now, I've only been in the house for 4 years, so it's fairly recent, I would say. But that was the first time I had my own bedroom and I cried. I cried for a fucking room. And I was like, I kid you not, for 2 weeks, I was so scared. All I could ask myself was, this is all I ever wanted my whole life, and I don't like this. Why is that? Like, was my dream of having my own space like a fake thing? But it wasn't. It was a nervous system thing. And that's the same with money, I would say, you know, like over the years, because I've grown from lower middle class with barely any money and living, you know, like bill to bill, you know, I started working when I was 13 years old, of course for free, and officially when I was 16. But I've worked for so long, I don't know how to rest. I don't know how to receive. And I still struggle with it. But starting my own business has really been a mirror to all of this. Yeah. And you know the question you were saying, when you help people feel safe in themselves, do you learn anything? This is the kind of stuff that I learn on a daily about myself. Yeah. And it's almost like I'm walking path to path with the people that I'm working with as well, because it's holding up a mirror against who I am and my relationship with safety, be it with money, visibility, fear of being seen, allowing myself to access those opportunities, not because I'm not capable, but because I'm scared. So especially I would say with money, it's literally the question that I asked this to myself. If I had X amount within the next 5 seconds, how would I feel? And I was panicking. And I was like, okay, if that feels uncomfortable, what's the next kind of bracket of money that I feel it's a little bit uncomfortable, but it's not as scary? And that's the point that I kind of put a pin on it. And I was like, okay, this is what I need to work towards. Not 100K, not 10K, not that far away number. It's a little bit less, still 50% uncomfortable, and still challenging, but still doable.
And how do people climb the safety ladder in their nervous system? So if you've identified that, like, for example, you asked me how would I feel if I just airdropped 10K into my bank account now, it would stress me out. I'd be like, oh no, like what tax laws do I have to like abide to, and like all this stuff, because I've been living at like a threshold. And so how do you, again, climb the ladder at a pace where you're not going to fall off, but somewhere where you're actually like in motion and you're moving?
Within my own self, I almost go by this like percentage thing, like I was mentioning, like, you know, when you asked me how like safety and permission, they're contradicting. I don't think they're contradicting, they go hand in hand, because you can feel safe while being a bit uncomfortable. And it's that, you know, out of 100% where you just want to run away and freeze, to, okay, I'm 10% uncomfortable, it's not feeling too great, but it's manageable, I'm okay. 50% was like, okay, this is too uncomfortable, but I'm still here, I'm not running away yet. So it's using that to check in with yourself, whatever the situation is, whether it's money, whether it's presenting in a meeting. You know, maybe you're scared of public speaking, start speaking with your friends, then build up to speaking in front of colleagues, then to seniors. And the biggest opportunities that came for me when I was in marketing, I was 18, 19, and I presented a campaign, a global campaign, to 5 different VPs across the globe. I would have never imagined that. Never in my life I would have imagined that. And that's the kind of thing that, sure, it takes time, sure, it's uncomfortable asking yourself those questions and doing all the shadow work, as I like to say. Mm-hmm. But you're still putting yourself on that trajectory, and that's what's the important bit. It's not going all in or all out. It's being uncomfortable, putting yourself on the trajectory, and I've been saying that word for too long. But positioning yourself in the way that you know you can do this despite it being uncomfortable.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like you're giving all these like gold nuggets, but because we're running out of time, I want you to give the audience homework. What is something that they can do to feel like just a tiny bit more uncomfortable but safe in that feeling?
Oh, I feel like being mean.
You can be. We can do levels. Give
level 1, level 1, level 2. I'd say level 1 would probably be doing something where you reject someone's plans or ideas about you or your schedule and going off and doing something on a whim for yourself. I don't know what that looks like for each individual, but maybe you say no to your friends this weekend and go cook for yourself. Maybe you try out a new class by yourself. If you're always surrounded by someone, do something by yourself. I'd say level 2 would be to do that mirror homework that I said, because that is really scary. And I would love for the audience to put a timer on to see
how long.
Yeah, how long they can actually do it for. Of course, like I'd say 30 minutes is probably a bit too much, but if you can hold it for more than a minute, I'd say you're pretty good at, like, you're on the right path, I would say. And I'd say level 3
Oh, there's 3 levels. Okay.
Oh, 3 levels. I told you I'm feeling mean.
Yeah, okay, 3rd level.
I'd say level 3 would be, I want them to think about a thing that they've always wanted to do but they've always put off. Maybe it's something from their childhood, like the craziest thing, like, oh, I want to hike to this place someday or whatever. I want them to think of something like that. It can be a project, a hobby, talking to someone. It can be literally anything, and I want them to use that as like a challenge for the rest of the year and try to achieve that or be as close to us as possible. Mm-hmm. I'd say those would be my level 3s.
That's amazing. What's your challenge for the year? Because then people are going to follow you and see.
Oh yeah, I would say I'm already like very audacious as an individual. Like, I know when to like give myself the permission to go and do stuff. But I would say my business has been like the biggest project for me this year, because I started this on a side last year and I've made a bit of progress from last year. But I've got like a list of companies that I want to work with, and that's been on my to-do list. So being a bit even more audacious than I am when it comes to pitching for my own business.
That's amazing. Okay, where can people find you, speaking of pitching for your business?
Oh, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can search up Bhavika Jagwani. Or you can follow me on Instagram. It's Power with Bhavika. And of course, it has all the links to my website and stuff like that. So stay tuned.
Amazing. I'm going to link everything down below, but just want to say, I always wrap the podcast up with a theme of gratitude. So can you please share with us what you're grateful for today?
I'm genuinely so grateful for this room, like allowing me to be here. And like I said, it's been my thing for 3 years. And I'm finally here. So really grateful for you and for Anna here to give me the opportunity. And I'm just really grateful for life, I would say in general, because I think as an individual, I've always stuck to a timeline about myself, and building a business and something you're passionate about doesn't follow a strict timeline. And I'm just grateful for the serendipitous opportunities and moments that I get on this journey. So yeah, what about you?
What am I grateful for? I am grateful that, like, I'm just grateful for connection, you know? We've had this beautiful conversation, and like you said so many things that resonate with me, and I feel like I've learned a lot from our conversation as well. And the fact that we can do that, the fact that we can learn from each other, that I can see myself in you and learn from you is just like such a privilege, and so I'm grateful for that.
Oh, I love that.
Yay! Awesome. Well, thank you for coming all the way to London today for our conversation. I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm sure it resonated with everyone who's listening. Please, please, please go check out Bhavika, give her some love. But thank you. You are such an empowering, inspiring woman, and I loved our conversation today.
Thank you so much.